Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Spartan Scoop. My name is Krista Koch, and I'll be your host. Today, we're doing another deep dive episode into those NACE career competencies, those skills that employers look for when they're making hiring decisions. I'm joined once again today by Tori Nair, a career counselor with us here at AU, and we're going to be breaking down the skill of equity and inclusion for you. This one is an important one. It shows up in a lot of different ways in the workplace, and it's always something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your own skill set and your own development. So we're going to talk a little bit about what it looks like, how you can develop this skill, and how you can demonstrate this to employers. Here's my conversation with Tori. All right, so let's spend a little bit of time making sure that we understand what this competency or NACE career skill actually means. Why do you think that equity and inclusion has become so essential?
Well, I think a lot of it is because every workforce now is so diverse in terms of all ages, in terms of ethnicities, in terms of abilities and neurodiversity and things like that. And I think that we're just so much more aware of these differences. And I think that it's just allowing us to have a more productive workforce and really embrace the differences and everyone's strengths and work together to meet whatever needs the workplace has.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. The global workforce means you're going to be working with people from wide range of backgrounds. So what does inclusion look like in a workplace setting beyond just, diversity numbers or being able to say, "Ooh, we have a lot of different people working here."
Yeah, I think it's just being aware of the different backgrounds and just being aware of what could be important to a coworker, a colleague, or someone on a team. Inclusion is allowing people to, like I think we often assume that everyone is the same or celebrates the same holidays or does the same kinds of things. And it's just more being open minded to all the different ways things are done and different, customs and traditions that people share and just being inclusive to all that within the workplace and ensuring that people feel like they're not being discriminated against for any of those things for the background and those things.
Right. Yeah, because if you're on a team in the workplace and people feel included and they feel like they have the tools that they need, then that team's going to be more effective, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. All right. And probably you'll be happier working on the team too if people feel
Yes.
like they belong on a team.
Right.
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 Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So it comes back to you as well. It makes your work environment better. What are some other ways that equity and inclusion might directly impact business outcomes or team performance?
I think it can help. I mean, I think just making people feel included or giving people equal access to things to get their job done allows it empowers people and makes them feel human, which again builds that morale on the team. And so it's similar to what we were saying earlier, but I think it allows people to feel comfortable being themselves at work, and that allows them to showcase their all sides of themselves and bring in some of these strengths and knowledge and expertise that they might have that they maybe wouldn't have brought in before. So I think it allows more open-mindedness and lack of judgment and just more ability to kind of brainstorm and just be very open in the office and be able to utilize everyone's their capacity in that sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? If people are comfortable having their own ideas and sharing their ideas, your business or your workplace is going to do better, right?
Right.
Because there are more ideas flowing, right? So, okay, so what might this competency look like? So, if we're talking to students who are thinking about how they might demonstrate this skill in the workplace, what does it? How does it show up? What does equity and inclusion look like in the workplace?
Talking to I think like I think of our students who go into an internship site, right? And they might be working with people of all different backgrounds, all different ages, all different things, and they just kinda go in with that open mind and asking a lot of questions, not necessarily getting into the personal details of anybody, but just kind of like just again, going in with an open mind, asking what people's ideas are, what they're bringing to the table, and then sharing their own kind of whatever they feel comfortable sharing. And I think just being open minded, I guess. I think that's really what it is. It's just being open minded and willing to learn and willing to and curiosity. I think that's the other one. I'm just being curious and just being able to appreciate everyone for who they are and the differences that they may bring to the table. But also understand that there's probably a lot of similarities then too, and how we kind of work together to make those work in the workplace. And so I think for our students, being able to show that maybe they've been on a team or they've been in a group project with people who maybe are share a different background from them and how they kind of navigated some things or how they utilize that to their advantage to make the team stronger, I think could be a really great way to talk about that in an interview for a job.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like what you said there about even going beyond what we normally think of when we hear the word diversity, right? You mentioned different ages, so I think in the workplace, especially, it goes deeper, right? It's deep working with people of different generations, different ages, maybe working with people of with different levels of work experience or different kinds of experience that they bring to the field, right? These are all things that kind of play into that equity and inclusion piece. So this feels like a competency that probably requires some ongoing learning. I don't really know that any of the NACE competencies are things that you can say you've mastered and now you're done learning, but this one in particular to me feels like something where you're kind of going to always be getting better at this one, right? So how can students start building awareness and skills in this area?
I think just maybe, I mean, honestly, I think as a student, I think just pushing themselves out of their comfort zone and being staying in kind of what they're familiar with and maybe joining a different student organization or a group on campus that has maybe is different than what they would have thought. Maybe they are joining, an organization that is not something that they ever, like, learned about, but now they're learning about that and exposing themselves to that, or maybe even just talking to their group members in their classes, or just yeah, I guess a lot of it is really just pushing themselves out of their comfort zone and trying new things, because I think the more you interact with people, the more you realize that diversity is everywhere, and that's sort of the like, great thing about the world, right? But just kind of being open to that and not just kinda sticking to what you know in your comfort zone, but pushing yourself out of that, for new experiences, I think that's a great way to expose yourself to and continue to build on that skill.
Yeah, definitely, and that goes along with, what we're always telling people, in our office is don't just go to class and go home, right? Find some other ways to get involved, whether that's working on campus or joining a student org or things like that. There are tons of opportunities at AU to develop this
Yep.
skill set. How can a student evaluate whether a company truly values equity and inclusion during their job search? Like if that's something that is important to you, how can you kind of figure out if a company actually values it versus just, talking the talk?
Yeah, I think that's hard, right? Because I think so many companies nowadays wanna say they're good at that, and so they put on their website, different statistics or different images or different things just to kinda show that they're good at that. I think actually looking at, the current workforce and the current staff at a place and really looking at how long they've been there and kind of the projects and things that they have accomplished together, asking about that in interviews, can you talk about, how, you encourage diversity and inclusion within the workplace, things like that, I think is important. Again, I think there's a lot of canned answers out there and there's a lot of like, this is, what they put out there just to look good, but I think really seeing how it plays out and maybe asking about how a project has and maybe you don't even mention equity and inclusion, but you just say, "Can you talk about, the people when you have a group that project that's been worked on, can you talk about a successful one and kinda how that came together and what they did?" Or something like that. You can ask kind of these examples and really see how that plays out in the workforce. I think also touring and going to the sites can be helpful too. I think we do some of those job shadow or like site visits where you can go out into an employer and kind of just see. I think sometimes experiencing it and like putting yourself in this situation can be a good way too to assess if that's they really are not just talking the talk, but actually are following through on what they say. I think internships too are a great way to see too when you try something out. I think it's always then you kind of know, are they really serious about this or is this just words that they're using to recruit students?
Yeah, internships are definitely a great way to learn more about a company. So I'm thinking your answer to that question made me think of something kind of related to this, but maybe unrelated. But how What are some other questions that students might be able to ask a company in an interview, whether that's for a full-time role or for an internship that might help them better understand the company's culture as a whole? Because equity inclusion is an important piece of that, but it's important when you're interviewing to also kind of learn what the company might look like for you, right? So what are
Yeah.
other kinds of things might students ask to get a better
Yeah.
sense of the company's culture?
Yeah, I so it's funny because I hear a lot of students, they want good, good work-life balance, they want a good culture of a company, and sometimes will just ask that specific question, like, "What's the culture like here?" Which is not gonna tell you anything because they're gonna have a canned response of how they wanna answer that. So I think asking more specific for examples, just like they're asking for examples from you as the interviewee, I think being able to ask, like, "Can you tell me about the last time that there was a social gathering within the team and what did that entail?" Or when the team accomplishes makes a big accomplishment or does something like what is done to celebrate or acknowledge that those accomplishments. I think those kinds of things, where you kind of ask specific questions. I know I heard one recently too that said, "Can you tell us about a time that you last implemented a change based on the feedback from your employees?" And I think
Oh, I
that
love that.
also goes to show, like, again, because they're not gonna be able to just make up an answer there, so they're gonna have to give an example, and if they can't think of one, that tells you something. So I think just asking some of those questions, but not directly saying, "What's your culture like?" or "Is there work-life balance?" but really more getting at these other questions that kind of get to it, I think is a lot easier and really can show, their true sides of things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important because you definitely wanna make sure, obviously the company is trying to figure out if they like you and if they wanna hire you, but you wanna make sure that you're also gonna fit with the team culture there and with the company culture there. Um,
Definitely.
yeah. Alright, so last big question then is, the other side of this. How might students showcase their own equity and inclusion competency to employers? What are some good ways that a student can demonstrate this to an employer, either on a resume or in an interview?
Yeah, I think definitely on a resume of being able to give, kind of specifics about the demographics of the people they work with. I know a lot of times I'll work with students who are in like social work or nursing, and they'll just kind of say like help patients or help students or help whatever. And if they can kind of say something more like, work with adolescents with developmental disabilities or something like that, it shows a little bit more context of who you're working with and it shows that diversity. And so, or like some of our students obviously are like inclusion aides, so they're doing this hands-on stuff right away. But I think that just being able to showcase that on a resume is helpful. I think in the interview, giving examples of when times that you've worked in maybe a diverse group or the times where you've had to maybe overcome a challenge that maybe presented itself or whatever it is. I think anytime you can give specific examples of where you've demonstrated that competency, I think that's the best. And so I always encourage students before the interview to really think of like, okay, where are times where this has come into play and how did I navigate that? And then be able to tell that story in the interview.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Just thinking of a lot of things that probably a lot of our students are already doing, and just being able to put that into context for the employer,
Yep.
um, is great. I think that's always the hardest part in an interview is thinking about those examples, right? So
Yep.
it's good to think about them ahead of time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for helping me kind of talk through this competency a little bit. I think this is maybe one of the more complicated ones. This one and maybe the career and professional development are the ones that are a little bit more abstract. So I appreciate it.
Of
Hopefully,
course.
students find this helpful as well. And of course, if you need more help with any of this, or if you want to talk more about this, Career Services is available and willing to talk. Tori is open for appointments, and if you want some more help with examples and ways to put this into practice, you can make an appointment with Tori to take a deeper dive.
Yeah. Thank you.